Hello, everyone, and welcome to your first lesson in graphing. When it comes to lines, we've done graphing with number lines, but this will be our first graphing with linear equations. Today, we're going to graph lines that are in slope-intercept form, and we're going to graph horizontal and vertical lines. There are actually three forms of a linear equation. The one we're doing today, our first one, is slope-intercept form. It is the one we will use most often, typically. It's the one probably most people are familiar with. The general form, slope-intercept form, is y equals mx plus b. You may have seen that before. Now, there's four letters there. Which of those letters, what do they stand for? Well, the m is the slope. Way of remembering that, think of it representing how much the line moves. M stands for moves. It doesn't actually stand for moves, but it's a way of remembering it. The y-intercept, it's a new concept, is the b. And what we can think of it as representing the point at which you begin when graphing. That'll make a lot more sense here in a little bit. Well, what is a y-intercept? This is a new idea. It is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Now, I will say, with a line, there is only one y-intercept. Whereas in a line, there are many points and therefore many y-coordinates, but there's only one y-intercept. There's only one spot where the line crosses the y-axis. Now, as we get to second semester, you'll see that there's other graphs that cross the y-axis maybe twice. There might be two y-intercepts or three. So right now, though, one y-intercept, and it's where the line crosses the y-axis. Now, being able to identify the slope and the y-intercept from an equation is an important skill to have, and actually very vital for graphing. So we're going to do that. We're going to do four of these real quick. Identify the slope and the y-intercept from a linear function. So y equals 2x minus 3. The slope is the number in front of x, so the slope is 2. If you want to write it as a fraction, it's a good habit to get into, 2 over 1. The y-intercept is actually negative 3 here. You got to look at the sign as well. On the second one, the slope is a fraction, negative 3/5. This is one time where fractions really don't matter too much. Makes it actually just as easy. The y-intercept is positive 4 or just 4. Go down to number 3, y equals 4x. What's the 4? Is it the slope or is it the y-intercept? Well, it's next to the x. It's attached to the x with multiplication. That's my slope. So the slope here is 4 over 1. The y-intercept, there's nothing being added. The number that represents nothing is 0. And the last one is a little tricky because it's not written in the general form. If you want to rewrite it, you could and say y equals, put the number that's attached to x with multiplication first, but you got to include the sign. So it's negative 3x, and then the 10 is positive, so it'd be plus 10. A little easier to see right now. So it's negative 3 as the slope, or negative 3 over 1, and the y-intercept is 10. Okay, now we're going to use this idea, what we just did, to graph. You're going to see that it's not too bad. So the first one, we're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept like we just did. So the slope is 3 over 2, and the y-intercept is 1. Now we're going to transfer those to the graph. B equals 1. That's the y-intercept. That's where the line crosses the y-axis. Well, if I know that it crosses the y-axis at 1, I can put a dot there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this 1 and put it on the y-axis, positive 1. M tells me where I'm moving. So I'm going to remember what I talked about with slope. I'm going to go up 3 and then right 2. So I'm going to start from that point where I was just at. And I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go right 1, 2. And I'm going to put another point. And then I'm going to connect those 2 points with a line. And I've just created a line. Next one's going to be a little cleaner because I'm not going to draw arrows in there and all that. But I am going to still identify the slope and the y-intercept. The slope is negative 4/7. Don't freak out with the fraction. The y-intercept is positive 6. So now I'm going to go up to positive 6. I'm going to put a dot there. It means it crosses the y-axis at 6. From there, I'm going to go negative 4/7. Now, there's two ways you can do that. The negative can go at the top or the bottom, but not both. So the two ways you could write this are negative 4 over positive 7 or 4 over negative 7. This is not okay, though. You cannot do negative 4 over negative 7. That's bad because that would be two negatives, which makes it actually a positive slope. It's not a positive slope. It's negative. The one I'm going to choose on this one is this one because it keeps things on the graph. So I'm going to go down 4 and then right 7. And I'm going to put another dot. You can see where that dot ends up. If you ended up somewhere else, count again. Connect the lines or the dots to make a line. And there we go. Let's go ahead and go to the back and knock these last few out. Number 3, what's attached to x? Well, there's nothing there. We know that that's a 1, or we should know that that's a 1. So the slope is 1. The y-intercept is negative 5. Negative 5 means I go down to 5. Put a dot. The slope is 1. That's only one direction. How do I make it into a fraction? You should know this. 1 over 1, up 1, right 1. And you can do that over and over again, right? Because the slope is constant. You can do the slope over and over again. Up 1, up, right 1. Up 1, right 1. And that'll make your line nice and straight, hopefully. There you go. Next one, y equals negative 3x. Slope is negative 3. The y-intercept is not there, so it's a 0. Where's 0 on the y-axis? It's right there in the middle. Negative 3, if I write it as a fraction, would be negative 3 over positive 1. So here's what I'll say when I say describe this. I'll hear people say down 3, right, or down 3 over 1. Over which way? You got to say right or left. So down 3, positive 1 is right 1. Down 3, right 1, I'll do it again. The other direction you could go is positive 3 over negative 1, which would be up 3, left 1. You can see it's still on the same line. Now, before I go any further, I want you to see the sign in front of your slope. If the slope is positive, it's going to be an uphill line like this blue one. If the slope is negative, like this red one, it's going to go downhill. I referenced that in the last lesson, just showing you that it's actually happening as we graph. Okay. Y equals 5/3 x plus 7. Tricky one here because, and you'll see why in a second, m equals 5/3, b equals 7. B equals 7, that's way up here. Now, if I go 5/3, that's going to be up 5, right 3. I'm going off the graph. What's the complete opposite of positive 5 over positive 3? These two things are going to be equal. The complete opposite would be a negative 5 and a negative 3. So that's how I'm going to get my other point, is I'm going to go down 5, right, or sorry, left 3. And you can see, if I draw that line real quick, if I go up 5, right 3, it's going to be, in this region right here, and it's going to connect to that line just fine. So to keep points in the graph, you have to be able to manipulate the slope to an equal expression at times. You don't have to do it very often, but you should know how to do that. All right, last one here before we get to the horizontal and vertical. Again, this one's not written in slope-intercept form. Probably best just to go ahead and do that. So negative 2x plus 5. Slope is negative 2. Y-intercept is 5. Going up to 5. Down 2, right 1. All right. And that is graphing lines in slope-intercept form. Now, graphing horizontal and vertical lines. Now, I know what your thought is. Y equals 4, that's probably a vertical line, right? Wrong. Y equals 4, kind of, I see why you would think it's a vertical line, because Y equals, you think vertical. It's actually horizontal. Okay, we'll summarize that in a little bit. Y equals 4. So I still have y equals mx plus b. Just doesn't look like it. Basically, the x is gone. What number would I have to put in for m to make x disappear? It would be 0, right? If I put 0 in for m, 0 times x is 0. So I'd get y equals b, or y equals 4, right? So the y-intercept is 4. I'm going to put a dot there. The slope is 0. I'll do 0 over 1 to make it a fraction. So up 0, right 1. And look what we just created. A horizontal line where every point on that horizontal line has a y coordinate of 4. You can probably guess what happens with number 2. This one's going to be vertical. Now, I can't explain this one quite as well because it doesn't quite follow y equals mx plus b. It doesn't start with y equals. It starts with x equals. This one has a slope that is undefined. It doesn't make sense. There's no y equals here. So the y-intercept is also undefined or not present. And you'll see why here in a second. X equals -2. That's the x-intercept, or where the line crosses the x-axis. And it's straight up and down through there. Every point on that line has an x coordinate of -2. Notice that it does not cross the y-axis. That's why the y-intercept is not present. So a quick summary of what I just talked about. Vertical lines start with x equals and have a slope that is undefined. Horizontal lines start with y equals and have a slope that is 0. It's one of those things that you just have to remember. We will see those often. So you need to get that as quickly as you can. That's it for graphing for now. We'll move on to the next lesson soon.